We had booze in the what did they call it where they had their food, huh?
In the ward.
Wardroom, yeah, that was the word I was trying to think of. And then they let me take turns up up at the helm, and I took a regular turn with the officers. So I had control of that vessel about 1/8 of the time I was on it.
So you got back to the States and
Norfolk, got into Norfolk, yeah. And,
you were discharged?
hmm?
You were discharged, how soon after that?
I'm sorry.
How soon were you discharged after that?
Oh, well, from there I got on a train for New York, and I was there for maybe 2 or 3 weeks, and then reported to Atlantic City, where I could stay in or be discharged. And I chose to be discharged so I could return to college. But Joyce just flashed something I should bring into that as a little memento of that. I got to Pennsylvania Station, and I told Dad that I was coming up from Norfolk, but he didn't have any idea what time I was going to arrive or anything else. But he watched every train that came in from the south, watching the crowds get off, and he ran up to me when I landed there. And we went into a cocktail lounge right away to have a drink. He wanted to find out all about where I was or what I was doing. And he looked at me, he said, you don't look like you've been in prison for a year. He said, you look pretty healthy. And he didn't know how long I was in England either, how much time I had to recover. But when I told him I was a traitor when I was in there, he said, traitor, he sat right forward, thinking I meant E-R, not a T-R-A-I-T-O-R. And I said, Dad, relax. But then he told me that when we had left New York to go into Penn Station, when I was first reported for service, he bought a ticket for me to take the train ride, and by mistake he bought a round trip ticket. He still had the other half, and he showed it to me, and I said, I don't want to use that. I want to keep that as a memento. So there's a picture of that in the book over here. But that's the way I found. When I got home, Dad had phoned ahead to Mom, and there were over 200 people at the railway station, my neighbors, all there to welcome me home. And I felt like something I really wasn't. I wasn't a hero, but they made me feel like one. It was a real tearjerker for me at the time.
Did your folks have the flag on the window? Star?
You know, I really draw blanks on almost everything. My little brother, who lives not too far from here, he said, "You don't remember me sitting on top of the arch that is in the tunnel going underneath, where you had to go to get home?" I said, "No." He said, "Yeah, I was up there standing away, waving my hands to my big brother." You know, all those things I had no idea.
So you know, all the P.O.Ws, they had a little banner that you put on the window. So I remember my uncles, when he used the P.O.W, and then there was different colored stars for different things. I know one for missing in action.
If I know my mother, as soon as it wasn't needed, she took it off. She didn't want any reminder of the bad days.
Since I got into the RAP, you went through college.
Yeah, I tried to get back to VMI, Virginia Military, where I'd gone to school before, but I knew I was going to be engaged to get married pretty quickly, and they wouldn't accept it. You couldn't attend and be married. They later changed that rule, but at that time they didn't, and I wanted to get back to school rather quickly, so I ended up going to a great engineering school in Pennsylvania called Lehigh, and I finished up there.
And you eventually started your own business?
Well, that took a little time. I went to work out in Wisconsin, a little town called La Crosse, and worked for the train company, the air conditioning people, who at that time was very small. And I grew with them very quickly.
That was train.
Yeah. I worked up there for 5 years, and I had a fine job working up on Mahogany Row with all the company officers. But I didn't like corporate politics, so I opted to be moved to Pittsburgh where I could work in the field where the action was. Well, I was only there for 5 years, and they promoted me to Cincinnati where I could run my own business. So So I took over that operation, and after 5 more years, they asked me to move to St. Louis, and they gave me Cincinnati after they bought it from the previous owner, and they allowed me to sell it back to them. And then they gave me St. Louis, and 35 years later I sold it back to them. But and by that time it grew from a group of about 6 to over 100 people in the organization. So Train was very good to me. Giving me a chance to tell you all those stories, you're a great audience.